the dominant narrative around anxiety, depression, associated medications, and what it is to struggle is predicated on victim consciousness. And what I mean by that is that you are encouraged. I call it victim coddling, right? You're encouraged to say, I hate this. This sucks. Why is this happening to me? Please fix it. And who's going to come to the rescue is the system, the doctors, the experts, the gurus with the credentials who are going to tell you about you what you can't possibly know, right? Because you can't possibly know your genes and your brain chemistry and whatever is the theory du jour. And the challenge is that the villain is you. So you are fighting you with the help of the system. And this victim triangle is an endless parade of hat switching experiences of suffering. And it's very familiar. I've had many patients describe to me the validation that they feel when they finally get a diagnosis, their first diagnosis. They feel like, oh, yes, I knew something was wrong with me. And now it's real, right? Now I can see and they agree that something is wrong with me. And it's not my responsibility. It's not my fault. In this warfare model, there is no victory. There is no end. And that silent scream of chronic illness becomes your open air grave. I mean, it's really not even that dramatic of a rendering of the situation to describe it that way, right? So, and you can see how warfare threads through the conventional medical system because you just look at the name of these medications, right? They're all antis, antiemetics, antihypertensives, antibiotics, anti-anxiety, antidepressants, antipsychotics. The fight is very tempting. It's very alluring. And there may be a time where that's exactly what you need to activate your energy. However, it's important that you know what the greater body of scientific literature and research has to say about this model. And that is my effort to provide the groundwork for informed consent that can possibly be made available to you through your prescribing physician.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo with co-host, teacher and socialist Andrea Lupson, and writer and teacher Jessica. We are online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our sites in the episode notes. You can also find our personal social media handles as at Don Eduardo Barca and at ZFTKE on Instagram for Kenny's, and Jess's Twitter handle as at JHomie89. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where we found this episode. Thank you. All right. Well, I'll just state this topic, which is Big Pharma. That is the discussion of today's episode. I want to make a quick disclaimer for folks. This will be discussing meds, we'll be discussing personal experiences, but also a criticism of the medical industry and Big Pharma. This is in no way, shape, way, or form any medical advice for anyone. It is a topic of discussion for anyone to explore, to reflect, to think about, to provoke, to think about critically. But we want to state that it is we're not your doctor, and we invite
Thank
people
God.
to just listen up. Anyhow, we've criticized and gone after Big Pharma around COVID, but we haven't discussed other areas of Big Pharma that I'm very glad, Jess, it was your idea to decide, or really convinced us to do this episode on mental health, and as well as maybe discussing the recent mental health issues that are happening around this country that I think was important to discuss. Did you want to add something, you or Andy, Jess, to this topic?
Well, I'll just say it was on my mind, like specifically, not just Big Pharma, but like specifically talking about antidepressants, anti-anxiety, like psychotropic, psychiatric meds. And it was on my mind recently. Well, it's always on my mind because every day, thank fuck that I'm turned down those drugs on the several occasions that I was offered them. And also that I'm no longer on hormonal birth control, which I think there's some overlap there, which I'm sure we'll talk about or touch on. But I was thinking about it specifically in light of the recent mass shooting, because I think it's sort of an area that, all the focus goes to the guns. Is it the guns? Is it not the guns? Right? That tends to be the way that the discussion is framed. And yeah, I think it's overlooked that the majority of mass shooters are usually on at least one psychiatric med. And then I've also been thinking about it just in the school context. Like one of the things I do in my job is I'm on what they call like the academic standards committee. And one of the sort of major responsibilities there is to read appeals and then sit in hearings for students who are put on academic probation and then want to appeal it. So basically want a second chance to try to come back and continue their degree after they've failed to the point where they've been temporarily kicked out. And I've just been noticing, I've been doing this like almost a year now, and I've noticed that almost across the board in their written appeals, one of the things they have to do is like they have to articulate their plan for like how are things going to change? Why do they think they're going to do better? Why should we give them a second chance? Why is it worth their money to pay tuition? And meds comes up. I've changed my meds. I'm now on a better med. That's better for me. I'm seeing a psychiatrist or I'm seeing a psychologist, and I've got my medications under control now, or they're going to put me on a different one, or, I wasn't medicated before, but now I'm not 100% of them, but it is like, I should go through and actually count. It's insane. And like the fact that this is part of their academic plan, I think just kind of speaks to how like mainstreamed it is. I think it's like over 70% of the American population is on some sort of prescription medication. And then I don't know, I'll shut up for now, but maybe in a little bit we can get into like some of the like more specific stats in terms of like psychiatric meds and just the increase as well in more recent years. Like this is just going up and up and up, the usage. So yeah, that's a little bit of like why it was on my mind.
Well, yeah, I didn't. This would not have come up if Jessica wasn't part of our show, because I wasn't thinking about this stuff. Like, there's the Big Pharma as Eduardo, you had mentioned, but I've been only thinking about that in the lens of vaccines. And then there's that stuff about how Pfizer was nailed for opioid for the drugs they were giving people to deal with heroin addictions. What are those drugs called?
Opioids, yeah.
Opioids. And there was criminality, like deep criminality in that. But I've never really thought about, well, again, and then we have Tom comes in and basically lays down a framework for basically saying not just that these medical institutions are bad or are unable to, but they are actually sickness industries. They are, if capitalism is a sickness, and I do believe it is a bad sickness and a bad disease for the entire system, then these are aspects of that system. They are frontline soldiers for making working class people unhealthy. So I should be able to think that through and think about what are these SSRIs or what are things like ADHD drugs. And I've had my own background to being skeptical of this. Even at a young age, I was nervous about drugs that were supposedly, even like the whether they be natural or unnatural drugs that were like the ones that got you pretty high or mind altering, things like that. Those always scared me. So I was always afraid of what would happen. And of course, there's stories people can tell about vision quests and going on those sorts of things and how it can change your life for the better. I have always just kind of stayed away from those. But
Talking about psychedelics?
Yeah, psychedelics and things like that. But caffeine and sugar, it's all over. I mean, let's be clear. Y'all see me drinking that kind of shit all the time. So that it doesn't add up. But there's a section of these drugs that I would be like, oh, I don't want to do that one, kind of thing. But I will say that there's people I've known in my life who definitely speak to the positive, life-changing aspect that some of these drugs have had. Maybe I don't know if I want to bring that up in here, but I'll have to see. But
are you talking about pharmaceutical drugs now?
Yeah,
or,
pharmaceutical, like the SSRI, like some of these, like SSRIs, or like some of the activating drugs that are supposed to help you out of depression. The ones that are actually sold by Big Pharma, and so my whole framework, my political framework. I'm biased here. I am biased to come to the conclusion. And Jessica, you posed this question, and I don't want to. You posed this question in what you wrote. Is wholesale rejection of all pharma a required piece of the revolutionary the revolutionary vision or struggle? That when you wrote that out, my first answer was, and my answer before I started was, I think so. And then my answer after looking into this was definitely yes. Like all this stuff's gonna have to again go. That's how I feel about it right now. But
not psychedelics though. I just want to put that out there. That's a different.
Look, I understand, but
we'll talk about that on a different day.
I
just don't want our listeners to get the wrong idea.
Well, you're getting that idea for me because I don't know about any of these. And I will say that the stuff that at least Big Pharma is doing is I'm not comfortable with, and I would say it has to be fought against, because it's part of an attack on us. So I want to get more deep into it, and I told Jessica that there was some chemistry stuff I looked into because I don't know a lot about this stuff, and there are some things like the question you said, how similar is Adderall to methamphetamine, like crystal meth, basically? And I looked up both of them, and they were very similar.
Yeah.
So I can show you that. And that was really, whoa, look how similar these two are.
Yeah. Well, maybe just like for a little bit of broader framing before we get into like organic chemistry.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, probably a lot of people know about the umbrella study, but maybe that's like a useful framing piece. So, for the past, I don't know, I feel like it started getting heavily pushed, I guess in the 90s. I don't know. You guys Andy's a little older than me, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that's when I remember this whole theory of like depression and anxiety and like mental issues being framed through the narrative of it's just a chemical imbalance in your brain. It needs to be corrected, and you can take this thing called an SSRI, serotonin, serotonin reuptake inhibitor, to correct this imbalance, and you'll be good. Right. And like that was pushed really heavily. I remember like as I was growing up, to this day, like most, I think mainstream people still in America, kind of believe that theory. And there'd been critics of it, people like, Peter Breggin's a very well-known, doctor who's been critical of that and been speaking out against it for years and years. Pam Popper, Kelly Brogan, people like this. But there was sort of a pivotal umbrella study that came out last year, and we can link it. It wasn't just like one little study. I've got it here. So they call it like an umbrella study, and it came out in Nature, peer reviewed and all that good stuff, all the credentials and everything. And it included 17 different studies. So the umbrella of that, 12 systematic reviews and meta-analysis, one collaborative meta-analysis, one meta-analysis of large cohort studies, one systematic review and narrative synthesis, one genetic association study, and one umbrella review, right? So this is like a lot of data. And basically their conclusion, I'll just read like one sentence, which is directly from their publication. So it says, the main areas of serotonin research provide no consistent evidence of there being an association between serotonin and depression, and no support for the hypothesis that depression is caused by lowered serotonin activity or concentrations. some evidence was consistent with the possibility that long-term antidepressant use reduces serotonin concentration. So it was basically just like this definitive debunking of this totally bullshit narrative that's been pushed. And, you know, it basically amounted to a premise under which, you know, millions of people were medicated under these drugs. And if you look back, like, as you know, listeners of this show probably, you know, would not be surprised to learn that the pharmaceutical industry, you know, ever since basically Prozac, which I think Prozac was like maybe late 80s, I want to say, was like the first SSRI that hit the American market. I think that was Eli Lilly. And even though like they actually added a label like at that time, because there were reports of like violence, like self-violence and then violence towards others that were induced by the drug. Like they actually had to add that to the label, even as early as like the 80s. But anyway, essentially that the pharmaceutical industry infiltrated academic conferences, the media, Hollywood, like all of it, to push this bullshit theory, as they do with vaccines, as they do with medicalized birth, as they do with virology, right? Like, and they succeeded in getting this conspiracy theory really into the false conspiracy theory into the mainstream psyche, to the point where even after this, you know, massive, like pretty much definitive umbrella study debunks it last year, like mainstream media like reported on that study a little bit, but I still don't think there's been like a shift in how the majority of Americans think about these things. And yeah, like you guys were both saying, I know lots of people who swear by their antidepressant, swear by their anti-ADHD drug, like they really think that it's saving their life, but the science would say otherwise.
Yeah, can I say just one thing that, I mean, again, and I'm going to show chemical structures of one thing just because, I mean, we might do it later too, but you know, I looked at the structure of serotonin, you know, and when I looked at it, I was like, I think I'm going to show it here. Oh, I got to share my screen, don't I?
We need to put a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode because Jess is becoming too radical. She's saying things that are going to make us get knocked out.
I gotta move your
disclaimer. You know,
that's
not medical advice.
I want to just say to Jessica that he's literally editing you when you talk about arming the workers and things like that. This dude down here, he's mansplaining to you about revolution.
Oh boy,
you guys stop him. Anyway, sorry. But so here's the thing that's interesting to me, because this is serotonin, and I looked at it, and since I had done crystal structure stuff, anybody who's works with a protein recognizes this little structure right here. This is the functional group of a tryptophan amino acid, right here. This guy right here. It's got like a benzyl group and an amide. And now, if I show you the structure of tryptophan, the amino acid, look right here, you will see it's almost identical. You've got that same structure right here. You've got this amine group, the amine group that is also on serotonin, right? This is the amine group right here. And then the only thing you could add is you got a little carboxylic acid thing going on over here. And then serotonin has an OH here. And I say that because people all the time, like when people talk about Thanksgiving and, oh, turkey, I've eaten so much turkey. Why am I so sleepy? Why do I feel, oh, it's tryptophan. Why do people say tryptophan? Tryptophan is connected to this notion because serotonin is a derivative or is made from tryptophan. And they're essentially saying that my serotonin levels are lower, or, you know, whatever, as a result of this inhibitor, this tryptophan inhibitor kind of thing. And so it's this notion of serotonin being mood altering is deep in our psyche and deep in the mythology of of modern society. And this study you cited, that was a meta-analysis of other studies, shows there's no evidence for this, and yet here we are running around. And again, it's like the Big Bang. Everyone's saying it. This is what it is, and yet there's information out there that really suggests that it's completely wrong.
And it's not just that it doesn't work, but we also have definitive evidence to suggest that it, for some people, I'm not saying for every single person, but for some people, can increase suicidal ideation, and acting on that suicidal ideation, that it can increase violent tendencies toward other people. That's just like the most extreme side effects. Of course, there's lots of like lifestyle stuff, weight, hormones, all of that kind of stuff, which can have repercussions in terms of, just somebody's general well-being. And then of course the whole, when you attempt to get off it, it's quite a miserable and difficult.
And to add one more thing, in the same way that virology likes to say that this single strand of DNA can determine so much about your well-being, this thing is saying one single chemical can have such a determinative factor on everything, and it's just like it's a very strange. Well, it's a very it seems very, this theme keeps coming up where they try to like take human conditions and bring them down to single chemicals or single strands of DNA, and not to try to have a more complex or more general or broader understanding of what might really be going on.
It's a very like robotic way to think about the human body, of like, well, just increase or decrease this one little thing and that'll just crack them. Like, this is not how we work. Everything is connected to everything. I'm going to turn a light on because I feel like I'm really dark. I'm going to be radical. I'll be radical in better lighting. Okay, that's better. Eduardo, do you want to chat? I feel like you haven't gotten a chance to get a word in.
There's a lot I have to say, but I'm appreciative that I was able to eat my dinner because I had back-to-back meetings and barely any time for myself. So here's what I'll add. Thank you, and forgive me, everyone who's viewing me eating. I'm not one of those Asian videos they do on Weibo or something where people are just eating in front of a camera.
Mukbang.
Is that it?
Mukbang or mukbang? I don't know how you say
something
it.
Like that. Yeah, I noticed there was some trend, and I thought to myself as I was eating, I'm probably becoming a part of that trend right now. People are watching me eat. Anyhow, you can keep that handy. I don't care.
Food is medicine.
I'll make you happy.
Food is the
So this is what I'd like to. Your questions were very provocative. Jess sent us questions, and I also was listening to the podcast. I heard half of it as I was coming here, and so I still have this. I'm still marinating on everything that I heard from Kelly.
Kelly Brogan.
Thank you, Jess, for sharing that. The episode by Kelly Brogan, MD, which I'll link in the episode notes. And I'll just read the 2 sentences from that. It said, in this episode, Kelly debunks common myths about medications and discusses the importance of reclaiming personal power to create the right conditions of healing. She highlights the dangers of antidepressants, the active placebo effect, and how medications can perpetuate the very problems they purport to solve. So we'll link to that. But what I wanted to say is, is anybody listening to this, because we went right into it, I don't want anyone to get for viewers and listeners or people who are not What's Left followers, they know us, and so they probably don't maybe misconstrue things that we're saying because they've heard a previous episode. But for anyone listening to just this episode, people might think we are even sharing with that episode of Kelly Burton, that we might be dismissive of mental health, right? That we are simply saying, oh, it's all in your head kind of deal. That's what that episode could be misinterpreted as, that you shared. And even some of the things that we're going to be saying could be misinterpreted that way. And I honestly think that we're saying the opposite. And we are, as you've shared before about women's circles, Jess, you've talked about women's circles before, and we're not, mental health as it is stated or discussed in the medical industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, is completely different from how we are discussing. And I hope that that is what we are able to distinguish here, because I do believe people are having, and especially are having a lot of crises in our society. I mean, any one of you might differ differently, but this is the way I see it. I believe that we have become so alienated from our tribes, from our, and I don't mean identity politics tribes. I mean from the way that we used to operate in societies that were more interconnected and looked after each other than the way that we're operating now, which is everyone doing, it's a very capitalist way of thinking, which is everybody separate and doing their own thing, and dog eats dog kind of world, right? Very individualistic. And I think that what we're experiencing today, and I'll share other episodes that I've also heard on KPFA, which I'm still holding on to in a very careful, cautious way, because of course they were very pro-censorship at some point. But one of the episodes that I heard was about how capitalism has really brought about the side effects of a capitalist society are just all of this arising of quote mental health disorders. Like it's more of that's happening because of how dysfunctional we've become, and in a capitalist society, the pharmaceutical industry is going to do things that are going to do what? Make profits, right? It's about that money, and so they're going to try and medicate everyone, and that's the way that we have to do things. And in that episode by Kelly Burton, I think I said her last name right. You just said Brogan. Thank you, Brogan. Thank you. Correct me. Just in that episode, one thing that did strike out to me was how people believe when you go to a doctor, instead of discussing the things that are happening around, the issue is ourself. The problem is who we are. We are the problem, and so we have to be solved. And I was sharing with both of you right before the start of this episode that there were that I have a dear loved one of mine who had some struggles, and so I recommended. I said, okay, well, let's just see if maybe you might want to do therapy, right? And so he did, and when he went to go, just after 30 minutes of seeing a therapist, he just was prescribed medication. And that's after just 30 minutes. You don't know anything about this person except for a few of their relationship issues, maybe their relationship with their mother, nothing about who they are as an individual, what they do, what are their passions, what are their interests, what are they eating, are they sleeping well, if they are in communication, if they have any sort of safety network, if they have a friendship network, if they've traveled, if they are, having great sex. Nothing about that is being discussed. Everything is, you have an issue with you. And as you were saying, Jess, I've heard that as well. I was even told that at some point when I was an adolescent. You have a chemical imbalance. Everyone has a chemical imbalance, suddenly. Everyone has a chemical imbalance. So I stated jokingly, and I kind of do have to say with some seriousness, I don't want anyone to, like, this is a kind of like a disclaimer, because I feel like what Jess was saying, we're going to get by YouTube, and everybody is going to try to shut this episode down. I think what is not being discussed is how much more we need of ourselves as people to be in connection with one another than to be just labeled as easily as you have this issue and you're the problem with it. I've also discussed about fostering a child before, and when I dug into the history of their background, the first thing that I noticed was the diagnosis that was done for them at 4 years old. To be diagnosed with ADHD at 4 years old, which is the very same thing they were trying to do for my nephew at 5, because he hadn't been to school because we had him homeschooled for the first 5 years. And I would just take him out to the park. There was no structure. So the first time he went to transitional kindergarten, suddenly maybe there might be some special support, special ed support. And that was, maybe there might be something that might need to be diagnosed because they might have a disability, or as they would say, learning disability that a child might have. Which, if we were to dig up the thousands of IEPs, individualized education plans that there are for students in special ed because of their behavior issues, you know this, Andy. How many Black and brown children were labeled ADHD, ADD? How many of our children in general in this country are being told they have issues and they're being in special ed courses, classes, and teachers, as exhausted as they are, I understand it, which is another plight, but the issue of how do we deal with these students? Label them, put them away somewhere, give them extra support legally, because that's what we can give them. That's the only way we can give these students support, really, give them social workers and all, is by giving them more humans. But how do you give them more humans? Well, you have to have some legal requirement to give them an IEP so that they can have that support, and yet it's still not enough, right? So I think I'm opening up all kinds of veins here. The last vein I'll just open up is that just because we were talking about how these shootings, right? Our students, their mental health issues, to put it conventionally. I know that Kelly Brogan says so-called mental health issue, something like that. I hope I'm not misquoting her. She might get upset if she ever hears this. Well, I know that people say our kids have a lot of mental health issues, but I really don't see how a pandemic and the shutting down of schools and anyone talking about these things, we've already discussed this. So we can always refer to the episodes we've done before, and the move for more tech. How the very same people who claim to care about our students were also deciding to shut down our schools and also pushing for more tech, and they don't do anything about it, but they care about our students. So we might not go into that one because, as I said, we already discussed that in a previous episode that we can share in the link below. But I really think that the issue is not of our children, not of ourselves as adults or our own psyche, but the real issue is, and it's just the lack of connection that we're having in our society, and the push for these meds that are actually causing more issues than they are solving. So I'll stop there. Maybe I've opened up Pandora box there.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. I know there's so much fear mongering with just the way that, I mean, everything, like, it's not even just like this particular subject, but like, I agree with you, Eduardo, that the average mental health, like the mental health of the average American is increasingly horrible. I'm not trying to say that like everybody's just fine, but I think the way that it gets framed, which like in your examples of like the way that it's treated in schools, of like, you have to have an IEP and you get your diagnosis and then you get like these like quote unquote support services and you get funneled through this pathway or whatever. The choice that is set up in the mainstream framework is, oh, you have poor mental health, some things going on. You can get your diagnosis, most likely be medicated, or nothing. You know, as if like these are the only two choices. And yeah, like people do have really poor mental health on average, especially with kids. You know, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of these issues resolve themselves. And people don't like when you say that because they interpret it as like, oh, you just want to like be neglectful, and you just want to like let your kid be depressed or let your kid be miserable, or like, oh my, worst case scenario. And you hear this like a little bit of a side note, but this is the sort of mind manipulation with the like trans stuff in terms of medicating young kids is like, oh well, they're going to kill themselves if you don't take them in and get them these drugs. And it's just not true, right? Like nobody's asking, well, what's wrong with the school system? Like, why do you have to have a diagnosis and an IEP in order to get quote unquote support? What's wrong with like, you know, the screens you brought up, right? I mean, we know there's been, I don't know how many studies about like the effect of Instagram, especially on like teenage girls and young girls, and that it is like literally creating mental health problems and even suicide. And nobody ever discusses like the possibility of, well, maybe we should just fucking shut it off. You know, like that's not a possibility. It's like drugs or we're fucked. And I just feel like so much of, especially in medicine, you know, like this is the way the COVID vaccines were framed. Either you get the vaccine or you're going to die or you're going to kill someone. You're going to be a grandma killer. Those are the two choices. There's no discussion of exercise, which by the way is like, I think pretty well documented as like, that is the number one intervention in terms of actually helping. I'm not saying that it's like a fix all or some sort of panacea, but you know, just like these basic things that are just not even on the table. And like you're saying, you can literally walk into a doctor's office. It didn't even take 30 minutes for me. Like this was probably, I don't know, mid like 2016 or so. Like I remember going into a doctor's office. It was the first time I'd met the doctor. It was less than 15 minutes before I was offered. Like I just mentioned the word anxiety, like low level anxiety. And it was like, oh, I can offer you this drug, and this drug. Like candy. Like it was candy. Just crazy. No discussion of side effects. No discussion of like what was actually going on. So I think like obviously like the pharmaceuticals themselves are a problem, but so much of the framing like happens just with like narrative shaping and the way that like choice is presented. And now like, especially in the current era and especially in places like schools and places where sort of like liberal, like, you know, neoliberal ideology has kind of become the norm. Any critique, even like just the mention of exercise or the mention of anything alternative is like stigmatizing mental health. And you can't stigmatize mental health because that's mean and that hurts people's feelings. So get in line, you know? So yeah, I'll stop there and see if you have thoughts, Andy.
Yeah. I mean, the framework, so even the framework, even for people who have been against what's going on with these vaccines, you know, often talk about the globalists taking over the world and things like that. But who oppose what's going on with the vaccines, who oppose what's going on with digital IDs, who oppose what's going on with what they claim or the building of a new world order, but want to hold on to the notion of keeping capitalism. I feel like this topic proves that that's a complete dead end. Because, and this, what I found so meaningful about the way Kelly Brogan talked about it is she said, mental health, or people we are claiming have mental health issues, whether that be our students, whether that be me, whether that be Jessica, whether that be Eduardo, whether that be loved ones of ours, they are, first of all, she says, to be stable in a crazy system is actually insane. Like there's something wrong. Anything that's if you live in a crazy world, then of course it's going to have expressions in yourself, and it would actually be kind of strange to you or yourself not to be crazy. So in fact, it is a sign of your health, because she does critique the system. I don't know if she's anti-capitalist. I am. I don't know if she is, but I'll get to that, that more. It's a sign of your health that because of your instability, when you are thrust in this kind of world, that you have that instability. And I agree with that. I think hearing her say that really made it clear to me that when I look at the students who are coming into my school right now and who have been, I fucked over by vaccines, like a whole battery of 53 different shots. We're not even talking COVID vaccine. We're just talking about the regular ones where the raised in autism and I do believe ADHD things will amplify that. But so there are drug things we're giving those kids to do that. And there's nutritional basis to what that's doing. And then we know the screen stuff that we're doing. And then we know the separation thing we're doing. So there's a whole layer after layer after layer that is driving our kids insane. And it's the same system that has tried and has succeeded in driving us insane, because our insanity is to have thought that this is a normal world to live in. And anybody who was actually sane would, if they were thrust in this world, I think would be like, what the fuck are you doing? They wouldn't just say that to the kids, they'd say it to me. Like, because you're like, how did you acclimate yourself to this? And that's a very good question. And I think that process, an insane world has to drive workers insane. And that's what capitalism does. I've often talked about it just in terms of alienation, but all alienation is capitalism needing to drive workers crazy. And that's what it has to do in order to succeed and to survive. And it has various ways of both gaslighting you, but also separating you from each other and separating you from yourself. And it describes a process of that, calls it alienation, but it's just crazy making stuff. And so there's a problem when, instead of looking at the students who are coming in and saying like, what can we give those students? What can we do to those students? Really, the question is, what's wrong with society that is producing people like this? That is doing this to people who didn't. This is not what they were like when they first were born into the world. They weren't like this. And it's done all this sort of stuff to them. And there will be no way of solving this and keeping capitalism, folks. That's the first thing I want to say is, I don't know what people have in mind for revolution, but it's going to have to be a fundamental, we're going to have to turn everything over. And I believe the system we're running in is capitalism. And that's why I don't think, if we're fighting this, we're going to have to fight the whole thing. I guess that's what I'll say. And the really struck me, that question you asked of Jessica, when you said, how different is the methamphetamine, crystal meth, from Adderall? And I was like, what's Adderall? Oh, Adderall is what they give, or one of the drugs that they do give for people with ADHD.
Everyone has ADHD. Find me someone who doesn't have ADHD if they've gone to a doctor.
But can I show this thing?
Mm-hmm.
All right, hold on. I mean, I think it's going to come when you see it. It's like amazing to me. So here they are. Let me get rid of this thing down to the bottom here. Okay, that's gone. Put this over here. This is methamphetamine. This is like the drugs that you say you'd go to jail for selling. This is the drug that you would say, oh, if somebody was on it, you'd say, get help immediately. This is it right here. A little benzene group. This is a carbon. This is a carbon. This is a methyl group down here. Then it's connected to an amide group and then another methyl group. And here's Adderall. You've got the same phenyl group. You've got the same linkage to a carbon. You've got the same linkage to another carbon and this methyl group down here. You've got the same nitrogen right here. If you notice, both of them right here. The only difference is you replace this one hydrogen here with a methyl group. And there you take one methyl group off of crystal meth, and you've got your ADHD treatment. It's, I mean, it's insane. And yet we're gonna throw people in jail and call people drug addicts for taking this. And we're going to give all our kids this drug right here. And pharmaceutical companies will become rich off of doing it. And in fact, it's going to be partially a result of all the vaccinations that they've been giving kids, that they've also been getting rich off of. I don't think about this whole thing run by Big Pharma, but there is a medical assault on the entire working class. This is not a It's not a health industry. It's a sickness industry. And things like that. When I look at that, I'm like, that's insanity.
And then for children too, like, would you give your kid crystal meth?
And that drugs like that look like that, methamphetamine, are part of a battery of drugs that are used for adults to treat depression as well. You get your SSRI, which is supposed to like deal with the serotonin effect, which they now are saying that it doesn't even have that effect, and you're going to get your upper. And
it really ties to like your thing about capitalism, because like you said, I mean, crystal meth, like the real difference between those two drugs is just the level of societal acceptance of the drug itself and the dealer, right? Like one is coded as illegal, unethical, dangerous, mostly for Black people, addicts, and yeah, if you're dealing, you're seriously risking some
and of course,
and the other one is coming from a professional, educated, got his degrees on the wall, and not only are you not going to be stigmatized for that in the current sort of woke cultural climate, you might actually be applauded. Look at you. You're special. Like you're handling this mental health issue, and here's all these privileges. I mean, I like it really, like sitting in academic meetings and hearing this discussed, it really is like, I'm not exaggerating. This is like how people talk about it. And I'm not trying to like minimize like actual problems that people have. Yeah, that we are sick. We're very sick, but yeah, it's fucked up.
Right.
Did I cut you off, Andy? Sorry, I think
no. It was just there was something, and the thing I never haven't looked into, because really the crystal meth and Adderall are effectively the same almost the same molecule. The question I don't know is dosage, right? Like when it's given to a person who has an OD or something like that, what level of concentration is in that tablet compared to the dosage of I don't actually know the answer to that, but if what they're basically saying is if you can dose down crystal meth well enough, then you can essentially get a drug that treats ADHD. That's essentially what we're saying. And do you believe in that? Like, folks, like, do you believe that if we just give our kids the proper amount of crystal meth, we can make them able to focus better in school? And one question, I was talking with Brandy about this, like, well, how is it that you have something that like really amps you up that would make you focus better? And I have that answer when I think about caffeine. Caffeine does play a role. I mean, I got to admit, does play a role. I can focus in a particular way on that drug. But then, of course, even more recently, I'm still finding myself getting shakier and shakier if I drink too much coffee and things like that. So these are not answers to questions like, why am I getting foggy? Why am I having a difficult time focusing? I think the real question is what's changing? What's going on in the world? What's changing in my life? What's going on around me that, that's causing me to have such anxiety? And if you can go into a doctor's office and get that question answered in 30 minutes by just telling you a drug, that's a crazy world.
Yeah, and like I think I put in my long list of questions like, you're not crazy, you're not stigmatized if you're taking Adderall, you're taking Lexapro or whatever it is, but like the fucking reactions that I get for taking like a reishi tincture, which is just like fucking straight out of the ground, like, oh, I'm a wild, insane, cuckoo person who is borderline like dangerous to society.
Right.
But I would say that people who take these drugs are stigmatized. I don't know people who would proudly go, oh, here, I do this. I think most people almost, there's shame in it. They feel like there's something wrong with me. I need these things. Actually, I feel like they're getting played on two ends. One on the end of, I do think these things are doing harm to them, but I also think they are shamed into also thinking there's something wrong with me because I need these things, and I certainly don't want to admit this to people who I don't necessarily know that well. I don't see people who've taken these or who are on these medications as being proud of it. I actually see them more hiding it, even at the same time they feel like they definitely need it.
Maybe not in every context, and I think it depends on what, like ADHD. I have seen people. I have ADHD. Look at this toy that I used to fix it, and I'm on this drug. And let me tell I don't know. I mean, there's a level of sort of stigmatization. There's also a level. I'm thinking about how I want to phrase this to not sound like an asshole and not sound, because I'm not trying to dismiss like the real experience of even like low level anxiety. But I do think there is a sort of way that just diagnoses in general play on people's innate narcissism. And I'm saying this as somebody who has like, been narcissist. And I'm not saying that like because you are able to communicate that you're experiencing, X amount of depression or inability to focus. Like, I think it's important to be able to communicate that and to not be stigmatized for whatever it is. So, some of these things are just part of the human experience and part of growing up, especially for kids, especially teenage years. Like, those are hard years for a lot of people. They're supposed to be hard, and I think people are more resilient than they want to believe. So this is not coming from a place of like, oh, everybody's just so like terrible and narcissistic. But I do think there's a way in which the industry kind of preys on this like feeling of like yes, like there's something wrong with you, your chemicals are out of whack, but also like you're special. Like you're special because we're going to give you this word for what you have that like rather than what would truly be an experience of sort of self-acceptance and like the belief that you can heal, or the belief that there's actually nothing wrong with you and that you are responding to a set of circumstances. You're experiencing an emotion. You're I mean, you're not the psycho. Most of the time you're not the psycho, like you said, Andy. Like the world is off, like deeply, deeply off, right? The thing, the overquoted saying, right, that it's there, what is it? There's it's like not a virtue to be well adjusted to a sick world or something. Help me out.
Oh, I have it if you want. It is no sign of health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. You can feel free to edit out the 25 seconds of me.
And that was Kelly Brogan quoting.
Well, I think that's
but she was quoting somebody else, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who that's attributed to, but like, I don't know. I just, back to the narcissism thing. I think they play it from all angles. Like they play it from whatever, like if it's profitable to sort of weaponize it and stigmatize people, they do that. If it's profitable to make people feel like they're being taken care of and like science is here to save them, the doctor's here to save them, trust me, just take this drug, and it'll fix you. I think all of this is, I mean, a lot of people will say like, oh, it's just like putting a Band-Aid on rather than dealing with the underlying cause, but I don't even think it's that. If it's a Band-Aid, it's a Band-Aid with like spikes and poison on it, like it's not even that, I don't think. Where like the real healing would be, for somebody to say like, there's nothing wrong with you. Your body has the capacity to heal from anything, really, right? And you're not sort of broken, and it's actually a lot of work to take on, like, whether it's lifestyle changes or time or changing the sort of community support that you have in your life. And of course, like if you're a kid, a lot of these things, are sort of out of your control to some degree. So it puts a lot on parents. Like, I mean, if you're working 2 jobs, you're a single parent, like it's a lot easier to just do what the doctor tells you. If you have this thing that can help your kid feel better, why wouldn't you take that?
Yep.
That's how they present it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry, I'm just spiraling here. So someone take over.
Did you want to say something? And I have a lot to say.
I guess the one thing I guess I would disagree with what you're saying, Jessica, and like I'm just picking the one thing I disagree out, is that at least in my experience, and when I think about families who deal with this, when I think about people I know who deal with this kind of stuff, none of it seems rooted in narcissism. It seems rooted in the other word you used, a deep sense of helplessness, feeling helpless. And like I do think of, I mean, we've talked about sexual abuse, we talked about physical abuse, but an area that I think even if a person hasn't experienced that and had the helplessness that comes from as a child experiencing that, because I don't think that produces arrogant people, although sometimes we can see arrogance comes out as a sideways way of really insecurity, but I'm not really talking about that. I think most of those experiences by young children produce a deep sense of helplessness when they've experienced that. But even if you don't experience those, neglect and being left alone and being isolated or feeling completely detached from your family or in some way, that in and of itself, I feel like hits just as hard as a hammer as any sexual abuse. And there's talk about Dalai Lama and doing weird shit. I think that right there hits just as hard to young people as any sexual abuse or physical abuse does. And it leaves a person, and then they've experienced that at a young age, really having no sense of self-center, if you will, no centered self that often comes from feeling loved when you're young and really feeling that, and loved by a community, not just one person or whatever, but really feeling seen and taken care of within a whole fabric of a community. I think that is essential for health. Then that person is going to look like having no center themselves, is just looking to find some kind of life raft. What's that circular thing called? When you throw it out to a person on the water?
A lifeboat?
A lifeboat or a life preserver. A life preserver thrown to them, and they grab it.
Jacket?
Yeah, but something like that, and they grab it and they hold on to it, and that's what's being offered from these people who are practitioners of the very system that made them sick. And so, and what they are, they're giving them a life, seemingly a what's it called, a life preserver.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, they're giving a life preserver, but that thing is actually going to sink. That thing's actually going to bring them underwater, and they don't even know it. And that's the way it's supposed to work that way. The doctors who are prescribing it don't think that. But again, just like teachers, we're all part and all trained head fixed in the sick system to generally see the problem as the patient or the student, not the problem with the system that is producing these effects. And so that's the only thing I might want to counter in what you said. I agree with everything else.
Yeah. And I mean, it is worth pointing out that like the problem is probably, no, I think it is worse by some amount in the United States, because this more than any other country, right? Like we actually have direct to consumer pharmaceutical ads, like literally they can talk through your fucking TV screen, which is not the case in the majority of countries. You have reps, pharmaceutical reps coming in, taking doctors to dinner, shoving this study or this study in front of their face, right? Like it's so, from the second they step foot into medical school, everything is curated, sponsored, pushed. So yeah, it's not like, I don't know. I think the rates of medication are just higher almost across the board for Americans. So I think I'm just thinking about some of our conversations about like, why didn't Americans push back, during COVID, for example, like comparatively to some other countries. And I'm not saying it's like, this is the only reason, but I do think we're like sicker we're sicker in a lot of different ways, and this is one of them, than some other countries.
Eduardo, or
I should have maybe said from the onset, maybe some people always say you should be transparent from the beginning. I personally, I've said before, in my sex work episode that I take therapy. I do once a week therapy. I was a psychotherapist. I don't take meds, and I've had in my family, I've had 3 different individuals who are schizophrenic, and so I don't want to I'm not just saying stuff like what I had said earlier, as if I'm trying to be dismissive of people's personal experiences. I can't really say, and I hope that this episode is looked at from that point of view, that, people are going to do right by what they feel they need for their bodies and for themselves. I don't want this to suddenly to be a criticism, but rather an exploration. An exploration into maybe some of the preconceived notions we have been carrying. I used to think in the same way that most people thought about, we should just be proud about our mental health, and if you have not to destigmatize people in the same way that, like, oh my goodness, I'm opening up another can of worms here, but like even all this, like, people on, I'll just say it, how people pride themselves in being fat and stuff, and I don't think that criticizing, so I'll use that as an analogy to what I'm trying to say here. I don't want anybody, as someone who's also gained weight over this past year, and I know people who also struggle with weight issues. I'm not here trying to say to them that they should be in this episode, they should be criticized for what they are, but in their positivity outlook, or them trying to destigmatize their appreciation for their bodies. It is, though, for me, maybe not for a lot of woke liberal folk, an issue that we should examine and say, what can I do to better improve my mental well-being, my physical well-being? I don't think that shaming anybody into trying to lose weight, I don't think shaming anybody into seeing that their mental health is an issue, I don't think that works. But I don't also want to dismiss, or I want to just go on and accept that we should just be eating as much fast food as we think that we should be, that it's okay to be eating, and just also neglect our physical well-being. That's not also what I'm also saying. If by not shaming or not criticizing people's physical well-being. And so in the same way with mental health, I'm not saying for folks to be ashamed or to think that they are they have these mental health issues for them to suddenly, like, I made it up all in my head. I want to state clearly, there are so many factors in our society that are supporting that so many people are labeling us as issues. We have issues with ourselves. And like you said, Jess, everybody has ADHD at this point. If you're not conforming, if you're not doing well with your grades, if you're not behaving, if you are, like I have even discussed with Jess when she was here on her visit, if because of the way I think, sometimes I get ashamed in the way that I discuss on What's Left, because sometimes I think I have side comments, or I don't think I'm funny, but I'm just saying these things that make people laugh, which to you both might feel like it's amusing and endearing. But to me, it makes me feel like people, when they criticize me, I have an issue with myself, when I really don't. It's just different person of who I am, the way I think, and how many intelligences are there by Howard Gardner, who said there are way more ways of thinking and just and performing in the world, kinesthetically, auditory, it just creatively. Like, there's so many ways that we stigmatize people for anyone not fitting into the mold, in this cookie cutter mold that this society is trying to do. So I hope it comes across that in this discussion, I should speak for myself. I'll speak for myself. I hope it comes across what I'm saying is everyone has to do some reflection and decide for themselves. And if they are on the path that works for them, that is the path that works for them. But we are also saying, and I'll say, because you brought up reishi, that other alternatives are constantly being attacked in the media, constantly being called as quackery, right? As taking a holistic medicine. And I appreciate, Jess, you had come here and you've given us tinctures, which I have in the kitchenette. And any sort of discussion around eating well, I was just eating my salad, and I was enjoying it. And discussions around exercise, or discussions around community and women's circles, and even the need for men's circles, as we had discussed also when we were at Kenny's place, and we had discussed how men sometimes don't know how to be expressive and show love for one another. They do it through either sexualized ways or violent ways, right? That these are the things that are not being discussed, or they are being criticized, and told that these are just wackery things. When there are so many ways to be thinking about this alternatively. And yeah, I want to say more a little about that as we are concluding. But I want to stop there to see if both of you have to say about what I said.
Well, first, I completely agree with you, Eduardo. Like that. First of all, I'm biased. Like, when Jessica brought this issue before us, I had already had my questions about brain altering chemistry things. And I've also had my counseling experience, which I've been in counseling for 14 years. At no point have I ever been introduced, or even introduced, or even thought of being introduced to something like medication from my counselor. So I've had my own experience of of the opposite of what, Eduardo, you were describing some of your friends have gone through, and Jessica, what I think what you might have gone through. So and I deeply distrustful of the pharmaceutical industry. So my bias is going to make me say these things are here to harm you. I'm not sure I'd recommend taking them, because they're only going to harm you, not help you. But as we saw with Kenny's episode about him choosing to get the COVID vaccine because he had to cross the border, and I didn't want him to do that, but that's a choice a person has to make on navigating all sorts of questions for themselves about what they're dealing with in this world, because we're all under attack in some way, shape, or form, I think, by this world. So Eduardo, you saying that if you hear a judgment in that, then that's a problem from us, because I don't think I'm in any place to judge anyone about what they choose to do. But I can say, this just confirms for me, confirmation bias, I will say, that all tech's going to have to go, and all these drugs are going to have to go, and all molecular biology is going to have to go. Like, more and more shit's getting thrown out. In terms of, for me, like, I don't think there's reason for any GMO, anything, at this point. Like, let's just roll it back to just nature and humans being part of nature. That crystal meth that they're giving kids does not, seem to me to be part of nature.
Crystal meth. Oh my goodness. I'm fine with you saying that.
That's what it is. I mean, just, so, so I just really agree with that, Eduardo. And so I just, this for me is the beginning of another area to explore that I'm going to learn about. Because I also do know that people feel strongly that if they, in some instances, if they didn't have some of these drugs that they might have taken, SSRI or ADHD, if they didn't get that drug, their life would have gone much for the worse. Am I to say that's not true? So it is complicated. But that's my framework, is to say, no, I do think we're all better off without these, and we all have to find a way together to make a society where we can really evaluate our own health. Because I don't think you can evaluate it in a funhouse mirror carnival that we're in.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to add a couple things. One
You
that just
should,
came
yes.
to mind because of what you just said, Andy, about like who are we to say like, oh, that they're not right, that it's whatever. My friend who swears, she swears her antidepressants are saving her life. One thing I will say, I get like it's not about judging the person personally, right? It's about looking more broadly at the system, at the industry, and being allowed to ask a question of like, somebody show me evidence, scientific evidence for why this drug should be on the market as a safe and effective treatment for depression. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking, if she's a crazy person or if she's making like a stupid decision. No, that's not what I'm trying to get at. Little bit of a side note, but like, it's worth bringing up. The placebo effect has been documented again and again and again and again in all sorts of scenarios. And I think people kind of forget that in and of itself, like the fact that they have to account for the placebo effect in every single drug trial ever. I mean, sometimes they do it in very shady, like not legitimate ways, but the fact that they have to account for that is such a testament to the power of the mind, which to me, like, I think about that and I just think like, God damn, like, what if we actually tapped into our innate power, like our actual, belief in ourselves to heal, which we clearly have. Like, even when we don't realize that we have it, we do, because it literally shows up in study after study after study after study. So I personally do think that some people, they so firmly believe that this pill is helping them feel better that they do. And it's not the drug. It's that belief. It's that, mental orientation. But like, what if we were able to cultivate that as a society without the drug? What if we could just tell people like how powerful they are? Anyway, and psychology might help with that for some. Anyway, different episode. I do want to say, like, just on the judgment thing too, like I'm gonna have to think more about kind of what I was getting at with the narcissism thing, because I don't think I articulated it very well. And I just want to make it clear that like I don't judge anyone for taking a vaccine. I don't judge anyone for taking an antidepressant. I don't judge anyone for giving birth in a hospital, et cetera, et cetera. That's not what it's about. I just want to be able to ask questions and have these conversations, and I think that the anger and the judgment should be directed toward the criminals and the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, in terms of like liability, they're the greatest criminals on the planet, even more than the military industrial complex. I mean, they own the whole society. I think there's like how many pharmaceutical lobbyists to every member of Congress? It's something crazy. There was one more thing I was going to say.
Can I also add, and we haven't talked about this, that there's a woman who's talking about how the pharmaceutical industry is deeply connected and actually is a subset of again, it's a DARPA creation. It's a Department of Defense wing. Is one of the wings of it is pharmaceutical industry.
Pharma, agriculture, chemicals in that, chemicals for our brains, weapons. It all fucking comes from the same origin.
The same people who brought you Ukraine are bringing you your Ritalin.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I just wanted to, I mean, how many people are on? I did look this up actually. Okay, so it's like, well, this is 2015 to 2018. 13.2% of Americans aged 18 and over are taking an antidepressant in the past 30 days. More than 37 million Americans are on antidepressants. This is just antidepressants, by the way, not like anti-anxiety, benzos, and all of that shit. Prescriptions of antidepressants rose by 5% in 2021, 2022, and that was the 6th consecutive annual increase. So it's increased 35% in 6 years. Whatever. A lot of people are taking these. There are people who don't. There are people who are not. But I just want to even like broaden this sort of frame just by mentioning that like there are a lot of really common drugs which are not like classified as like psychiatric drugs, but that have psychiatric or psychotropic effects. And one of the ones that I brought up in my like list of questions that often gets overlooked is hormonal birth control, which a fuckload of women in this country are on, and they're not even told. I mean, I think people know the kind of stereotype of like, yeah, birth control can kind of like make you crazy, or it can make you cry all the time, or it can make you fat, or it can make you feel like you never want to have sex again, stuff like this, right? But that's not really taken very seriously, at least in my experience, and a lot of women that I know, when it comes to like having conversations with the doctor. And it's the conversations that, and I have, I was on hormonal birth control for over a decade. The conversations that I hear people describing in terms of like, oh, my ADHD medicine is like making me really sleepy, or it's making me, act this way. Oftentimes the doctor's response is, okay, well, let's change the dosage, or let's switch you to a different one. Let's do an off-label one, or let's do a generic, or let's switch the brand or whatever. And that's the exact response you get when you go in and say like, oh, my birth control, I think, is kind of making me, whatever, gain weight, or it's making me cry for no reason. You're often told, give it 3 months, and then if it doesn't work, then we'll switch you to a different brand. Right? Like, this is the solution. And they've done, I mean, just in terms of like personality changes, like there's that famous, I think it's like the people refer to it as like the t-shirt study or whatever, but like that literally like women pick different partners when they're on versus not on hormonal birth control, because that's how much it affects, like, you can't just shift, oh, we're just going to give you this one synthetic hormone and expect that it's going to not, cross the blood-brain barrier, as they say, and that it's not going to affect other things, right? Like, we're not robots. So I think there's a lot of people, like going back to what Eduardo was saying a little earlier about like learning certain things about yourself, the way you communicate, or what upsets you, or what your traumas are, right? Like, I think there's just a lot of people walking around who literally like don't know themselves and haven't even been given the chance to know themselves because they're drugged. Like, I mean, it sounds like something out of a horrible like 1960s Hollywood movie, but that is the reality. And I don't want to sound like I'm like infantilizing people, or like to suggest that like they can't make their own choices. Of course they can, but these chemicals do have effects in the brain, and in some instances, right, like just going back to like the, one of the sort of triggers for this episode, which is the school shooting stuff, right? Like, we don't know. I'm not making an argument either way, but we do not have like sufficient or definitive evidence that owning a gun is going to make you more likely to go into, I mean, I guess it will just by nature of like having access to it, right? But like that this is going to make you into a violent person who's going to go and like murder a bunch of people. We do have definitive, and we have had it since Prozac in the 80s. We do have definitive evidence that for some people, psychiatric medicine makes them violent when they wouldn't otherwise be, right? And so like the fact that we can't even ask that question, I'm not saying it's 1-to-1 ratio that you take this drug and you're automatically, going to be like this, but why can't we have that conversation? Like, why is it always, no, it's just the guns. It's just the guns.
Well,
Oh my
Eduardo knows
goodness,
we've had
Jess.
episodes on this stuff, and we may have to update it, Jessica, with you on, because I can definitely tell you that I definitely believe that guns have nothing to do with how violent you are. And I think the answers that they're coming up with gun control those are state answers. That's the same state who fucked you up with drugs, and who fucked you up by putting you in front of screens, who fucked you up by separating you, now saying we're going to take your guns away from you. And they have a reason for doing that, because they're trying to put us into a physical prison, control the currency, and certainly don't want any people having weapons if they want to change that, because people will need to have weapons to change that. I think there is a definite interest behind by the state getting us to believe that it's keeping us safe again by taking weapons away from workers. And I'll also, I think, Jessica, you would definitely agree with this, which is when you think about people who actually do fight, they're usually the most peaceful people in the world.
Yeah. Something that I learned in thinking about preparing for this episode is that it's like 1% of mass shootings that are school shootings. It's so low. It's so interesting that
1% of what?
1% of mass shootings are school shootings, approximately.
Oh.
Yeah. But that's like, when people think mass shootings, like, because of the way the media, privileges certain examples and not others, right? Like, I think people like automatically think shooting up a school for the majority, which is so interesting.
And just to point out, Eduardo, I don't know if you heard this, but Lowell High School is starting, which is a school in San Francisco, is starting a program of instituted lockdowns, safety lockdowns, where what comes in can be regulated. You have to have one of those QR code sorts of things. You can have it on your phone, you have an app, or you can have a lanyard, but your ability to get in or out of the school is going to be controlled by that. And it's all being done it's very digital, it's very lockdowny, it's very like social credit. Oh, and the people who can go in and out may be also attributable to how tardy are you, what are your grades like, things like that. They're building a social credit system right at Lowell High School, built right around the world that Allison McDowell was talking about.
That'll be great for everyone's mental health, though.
Yes, and they're doing it all at this time of, again, they're talking about the mass shootings, they're talking about this, and so
fear.
Yes.
So I was just going to say that there are, along the lines of what I was saying earlier about how either it's uncovered, right, not covered, or criticized, holistic medicine, capitalism is not discussed when it comes to the side effects of the system, just how if people just see their primal needs, food, if people taking care of their primal needs, food, shelter, clothing, water, I just know that when I was having two of my friends from Venezuela come here, they were not, well, one of them I got to know in Mexico as he came over here to the USA instead, how housing is such an issue. People cannot concentrate if they don't have a place to live. Currently, I have a 14-year-old with her mother. My cousin, she's 14, I can say this, and my aunt, who is the mother of my 14. They live in a shelter here in SF. And so I switch back and forth. 1 week she stays with me, 1 week she stays with her mother. The shelter is all women, has other children, other adolescents, and it's in a school that has a large auditorium. And I just know that for her to concentrate in school, just knowing what to do right after school before 7 p.m., before they open, is like constant. The issues come up because of what she's doing, after school and before the shelter, these hours, because you don't have a home to go to. And the food that she eats. And I remember even this happened with my foster child. Just the foods that they were eating, the attention that was not being given, the connection that was needed, and slowly came off meds. I had suggested to their psychotherapist, psychiatrist, if we could just try a trial, a summer without meds, as long as they were with me. And we did, and it was successful. But there was a lot of exercise involved. There was a lot of changing of habits in food, and there was a change in the way, the structure of the day, and it was a different way of doing things. And so what I'm just trying to point out with these examples are just how much other things are overtaking the needs of someone, and that's what's causing these mental health issues to arise. I've shared in a previous episode my sex work journey, and I remember many times that I was solicited, requested. Excuse me, I have allergies, and I just remember being solicited many times. And yeah, in the very beginning, it was, "Oh, do this for me, do that for me, this sexual act here, do this." But over time, some of those requests turned into hours-long conversations. Some of them were just not even sex. A lot of it was just human contact, massage, or this sensory experience that was necessary for this person to feel like they had some connection, because they weren't getting it from their spouse, or they weren't getting it in their life, or they hadn't had the connection. And a lot of the straight men, I remember, had no way of doing things with other men. Like, they didn't know how to be in connection. And a lot of it was just, they thought it was sexual. And then it was, how do I just learn how to be with someone who's not going to harm me, who's not going to, because I was basically there to do whatever they wanted me to do. And that was a form of control. I could see for one person in particular that and again, disclaimer, I'm not a sex therapist in any way, but I remember one person who had been in the military in Latin America. The way, the aggressive manner and behavior directed towards me and touched me and trying to do things to me, I remember intervening and saying, I don't think I can continue doing this because everything is becoming too physically violent, and I think I'll stop here. And it was, oh, no. He didn't know how else to perform with me, how to behave. And so I just said, well, we could try something else, but if you're willing to explore. And through those explorations, it didn't become sexual. And it was more of a connection that I had with this person that I still to this day feel very connected to. Obviously, I've stopped seeing this person, but it was just, how do we gain trust? How do we communicate? And how do we know how to feel safe around another person that isn't going to do anything to you? Because most of his childhood was being sexually abused by someone else, and needing to do that for someone else, needing to control and abuse someone else. And that target was to pay someone to do that, because, you can't do that in society. Otherwise, you're going to be labeled, sexual assault or whatever. You're going to be doing something that you shouldn't do because it's not consensual. Whereas I was consenting, but in exchange for some rates and also with limits, right? But then it transformed into this other thing, which is, it became something else entirely. It became a connection with this other person that I have found. And that was something that changed. And I realized just from that, how much people don't know how to behave in a society that we're just messed up. We don't have the connection. And I also, moving on from like that kind of work, also just older people and women also who weren't happy in their marriages, who felt that they were just stuck in them because, according to them, they had no other way to leave the marriage, and they were rich, and normally they tend to be white and rich women who lived in Pacific Heights, but tended to have this desperation in their relationship because they didn't have enough physical contact or affection from their spouses who weren't home and probably cheating on them, and just also the older people who lost friends and didn't know who to turn to. A lot of gay men in San Francisco because of, they become less attractive in the community, or so to speak. Then they start hiring young people, and then they, in my case, they just wanted someone to feel in connection with, and so these things happen. And now back to away from sex work, the relationships I have with my family and the relationships I have with my brother and former students who are now older, I should say, they're consenting adults, but as platonic relationships that I have with my friends and community members, it just shows how much people need those tribes. That's what I was talking about, and the necessity for that we're not having, I feel so much more at ease when I can discuss my issues with another parent or another family member at my school site than I feel with educators. I don't feel connected. I feel more like it's hostile. I feel defensive. But whereas I can just feel connected with someone in particular, one parent in particular. And this is not woo-woo stuff, as I'm going to just conclude here. There was an episode that I want people to listen to, which is a very easy episode called Alone Enough by Radiolab, and I'll share it in the description, in the episode notes. And it's about this woman, Lyle Wilcox, who is a rock star in the world of competitive bikepacking. And she broke the record for men and women in doing, I think, 18 days of competitive bikepacking. And when she won, people doubted her win. Why? They doubted her win because she was being filmed. There was a filming crew that from the distance were filming and documenting her journey. And the person filming her was her wife. And when when she won this competitive bikepacking competition, they said, you had emotional support right there, which is one of the reasons why you probably won. And so in this episode, Radiolab, they discuss the science of what it does when you're in presence of another person, even when you're enduring hardships and crises. And I recommend anybody to listen to this episode because there's some scientists, and I say that not because I think we need scientists, but because I know some people who listen, the viewers and listeners might like, oh, well, where's the science? So for people who want that, there it is. So in this episode, they break down the science of what it does to have that emotional support and in that connection you have with one another. And they talk about Lyle Wilcox and her emotional support as one of the reasons why they discounted her win, even though now she's going back to that competitive race again, and she's going to redo it without any emotional support and show that she's did it without it. But it is an interesting discussion about what does it mean to do things in connection or to have people when you are normally what I think we celebrate in this society is the celebration of individualism and solitude, and you can do it yourself and you don't need anybody, right? But what is it when you do have that care for one another, right? Like when, Andy, I appreciated you had called me about your shared experience this past weekend. And I appreciate Jess being here physically with us. And I had some emotional moments where I shared some things with Jess, and it was different than I would have received over this, right, video call. And strengthening those relationships and having that support, the emotional support, the eating well, the exercise that we need, the need for us to be in nature and gardening and to be out doing these things. These are the things that I think are being dismissed. So I guess that's what I want to state as what do we do about it, or what do we need then if we're not taking these pharmaceutical meds? It's also the exploration, as I had said, that no one is, I hope no one, I'm not, as Jess also mentioned, we're not attacking individuals here, people in particular who have mental health issues, as I'll just say for conventional use, but really attacking the whole industry that is trying to sell everyone that something's wrong with you. And I invite people to really look at themselves and explore for themselves what can they do differently for themselves that they might be lacking of, which is that emotional support connection I was discussing, which is a discussion about how to communicate with your partner and your sex life and how that is uncomfortable, and also having more family and friends involved, whoever that chosen family of yours is, to be there, and how do you eat differently, and as all the things I already said, right, to take care of those
sleep.
needs.
You always forget sleep, Eduardo. I'm calling you out.
Thank you. And Jess is always calling me out for it, and I appreciate it. I appreciate a good friend calling me out for it, and she is right. Don't ever say she to a Brit. You have to say their name when they're in presence with you. So Jess is correct. Yes. Yes, and sleep. I appreciate that very much, Jess, and calling it out. And that's what I think that this is a call for more than anything. It's to examine ourselves, to find a way to bring more health into our life, both physically, spiritually, mentally, right? Oh, anyhow.
I think that's a good way to wrap up, and it just, that last part made me think about that saying, or I don't know, quote. I don't know if it's like attributed to someone, but just the saying that healing is the highest form of revolution, which I think I increasingly agree with that. Yeah, and it, obviously, like you said, there's different types of healing: spiritual, physical, psychological, intergenerational, et cetera. But yeah, I think that's a good question, like a good question to ask is like, well, what needs to be possible? Like what do we need to change to make healing possible, and thus to make revolution possible?
And take more mushrooms, reishi or any other ones that might be necessary.
Yeah, a little reishi never hurt anybody.
Not me.
Reishi you can eat, doesn't do anything to you, Andy.
We'll see. That's another area that maybe I still have questions.
We'll discuss it.
Eduardo will take you to the forest and discuss. No, consensually. Yeah, that's the other thing we didn't talk about, is informed consent, which does not exist.
Right.
That does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream from left. We post information about our topics and our guests and the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. And if you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog, where Andy will answer. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Jessica and Andy Lipson, and you can find our social media handles as @ZPKE and @Don Eduardo Barca on Instagram, and Jess's Twitter handle is @JHomie89. Thank you very much. Ciao.
Ciao.